Oh, the Lord will provide. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. And when I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I've got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I've got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I've got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I've got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you. I lean on you, Lord. I lean on you, Lord. For the things that I need, I lean on you. When I don't know what to do, I got the faith you're gonna see me through. To supply my every need, I lean on you.
Hello? Yes, it's working. Yellow, it's my favorite color. That's why it works. So, yesterday I had a root canal. Wouldn't recommend it. Uh, Not fun. Uh, but anyway, they numbed my mouth really a lot. And that's like the worst part. But I mean, it had been like many, 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 many hours, and I could not still move my mouth. I mean, like the numbness was gone, but I could not move my mouth. My mouth was drooping down. I couldn't move the side of my mouth. I was panicked. I went back to the doctor, and she, said, "Well, I don't think you're having a stroke. I don't think you have Bell's palsy." And I was like, "Me neither. If I thought I was having a stroke, I wouldn't be here. I'd be at the emergency room." But anyway, she said, "But this can trigger Bell's palsy." And so, a root canal, which I never heard that. And so that was a little bit, and I could tell she was a little concerned. She said, "I think what you're experiencing is normal for today. I think it's normal for today." And so, and that wasn't very reassuring either. uh, but she said, "But if it continues tomorrow, then, for sure, come back up here, call us or whatever." And so I didn't feel real good after I left there, but I was like, okay. And so uh, she was super nice and everything. And so I, I went home. I mean, Jonathan went back up there with me. He didn't go for my root canal, but he went back up there with me because he knew I was just, kind of scared. And I had already resigned myself to the fact. And I mean, that wouldn't have been the end of the world. That wouldn't have been like the most horrible thing ever. She said, if you do have like nerve damage, she said, she said two different things. She said, sometimes it takes years for nerve damage to repair. But sometimes, like, if it happens really fast, it can repair really fast. And I was like, you're not making me feel any better. Just be quiet. Stop talking. And so, but so I left there and I was like, okay, this is just how I'm going to be. I was thinking, I'm just going to not be able to smile normal. I'm not going to, I could still talk and everything. So I was like, this is how I'm going to be. And so, uh, Jonathan's like, we'll pray about it. I was praying, I had like everybody praying about it, like my mom praying, like, and Jonathan was praying and everything. And so I went home and I went to see my mother-in-law because, she lives down the street and Kelly was on a call and that's a whole other thing, but I was trying to get out of the house. And so I'm not kidding you. We prayed about it and then like, it just got better. I just, I, I left her there and I was like, I was moving my mouth and looking in the mirror and making a face and like I was like, it's back. Like I can move my mouth now. And I'm not gonna say it's just because, the nerve thing went away. I'm gonna just give the glory to God because like, she was concerned. The doctor was concerned, I was concerned, and I was like, I've had a lot of dental work. Look in my mouth. You can see I've had a lot of dental work. I've had things numbed up before, and I can still always move it. I can't feel it, but I can move it. And so that's why I was concerned. And she was like, well, the numbness is normal. And I'm like, I know numbness is normal, but not being able to move, that's not normal. And so anyway, I'm just going to praise the Lord and give him the glory for it.
I'll go next, I guess. I know there's other people that probably have something to share too, but this goes back a couple years, but back in 2020, I think it was, when you had your surgeries in 2021, in March, right? Well, in 2020, Jessica had mentioned to me that she'd heard about a job opening for a school that she knew one of the people there. So I was like, I had been talking about going back since Megan was graduating. I was not going to have kids at home. I was going to go back to work. And I went and applied, and they offered me the job. And I was like, why would you? I have been out of the teaching realm since Megan was born, and she was a senior in high school at this point. And I was like, okay. And it was for a 5th grade class, which I had taught 6th through 9th. So I was like, didn't really want to go back to that middle school age. No offense to any of you middle schoolers, but I just did not really want to. But I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm supposed to, but I just could not get peace about it. And this was in the October of 2020. Missed the COVID and everything, and I was still going to be going back in person, and I could not get peace about it for anything. And I turned it down. Well, come that March was when Brother Jesse had his surgery. At the same time, Sister Floribel broke her leg. And if I had taken that job, they told me I'd have no time off that year, none. And I basically lived at their house for 2 weeks. I was there when they got up, I was there when they went to bed. And if I had taken that job, I would not have been able to help out my parents. And I know God put that on me. No, we didn't even know he was going to be having surgery, and we definitely didn't know she was going to break her leg. But he put that on me to say, not now. And so I thought that coming year, I was like, well, was he saying not now or just not? And so I applied for a few more jobs for the 2021 school year, and I got offered 2. And a lot of people had talked to me, they're like, I don't think you should go back to public schools. I really don't. But something in me was telling me that's what I was supposed to do. Part of my way of showing my light was to go to these public schools and share that with these kids, with the parents, with the teachers that I work with. And I went and interviewed for a 3rd grade position at both schools, and they both offered me 5th grade again. I know, and I'm like, okay, Lord, why do you want me to do 5th grade so badly? So I did it, and I came into Bible school, and I was like, all right, I can relate to a 5th grade girl, but I cannot relate to boys that age whatsoever. And that Bible school, Owen had come down with some of them, and Trista says, could you go pray with Owen? I was like, okay. And when I went and prayed with Owen, there was a connection there. And I felt like God was answering me on that he would help me with that connection. And while I'm teaching 5th grade that October, our online business that I had been doing while the kids were home got cut in half. So I knew God gave me that job to make up for that we were going to be losing. And this year, this end of the school year, the principal told me at the end of last school year, she decided to move me to 3rd grade, which was where I had asked to be in the beginning. And my class this year, I absolutely adore my class. I love my co-teachers that I work with. We have prayer meetings at school. We get together and have prayer meetings. We send each other scriptures back and forth. And my class is known as the class everyone wants this year. All the teachers in the building, like, we want your kids. And I just wanted to give God the glory because it was a long path to get there. But I had to learn that he was going to take me through that song, I Lean on You, Lord. I had to learn that he's going to lead me. Even if I didn't see the end or that path that he was taking, I had to just keep leaning that, okay, Lord, I know you're going to do this. I know you're going to do this. And I'm counting my blessings that I believe he's going to carry me through with my next group coming in next year. So.
Well, you know how you had to wait on the Lord. And I was thinking, I've had to do that before, and it's really hard to do. As you all know, years ago I worked at Macy's, loved it, but I did have to miss church on Sunday nights. Well, Sunday days, but I was able to come on Sunday nights usually. And Missy had texted me, and you all have heard this before, some of you may not have, but Missy had texted me and had told me about a job in the unit that she worked at for the University of Louisville, and it was in research. And it was a front desk position. And first of all, Missy and I are close, but at the time, I didn't know she liked me. When she texted me, I'm like, so funny that she texted me. And I looked at the job, and it wasn't really anything that I was interested in, but I told her I appreciated her letting me know. And she said, well, if something else comes open, do you want me to let you know? And I said, sure. And probably 2 or 3 weeks later, she texted me again, and there was a regulatory position open. And Tim and I talked about it, and he was like, it's unusual that she would text you about a job, and it's unusual that 2 jobs would open up in a unit it was fairly small at the time. We're really big now. He said, really think about this one and pray about this one. So we did. And at the time, I was in commission sales at Macy's, and my income was based on my sales, and I was a good salesperson at the time. So my income was good. And so we prayed about it, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead and apply. It can't hurt to apply. So I applied for the position, and I got a call. Now, I know I wouldn't have gotten the call except Missy had told them about me, because I think there were 80 applicants. So I know that she helped me get my foot in the door, but she would not participate in the interview because she didn't want to be biased. So I wasn't even nervous for the interview, because I thought they're not going to hire me because I have no medical background at all. We work in pediatric clinical research, so we do clinical trials for children up to 18 years old, through 18 years old. And so I thought, there's no way they're going to hire me, so I wasn't terribly nervous about it, but I looked up the unit on the internet and kind of got some information about them and learned what they did. So when I went for my interview, they interviewed me with the entire team, all the nurses, all the administrative staff. They interviewed me with everybody. And then I also interviewed with the director and the regulatory manager and the business manager. And I remember one of the questions they asked me was, what was my weakness? And I was very honest, and I said, the computer. Well, everything we do is on the computer, so that should have kicked me out right then. I said, but I am trainable. I said, I'm teachable, I'm trainable, I could learn anything that you would teach me. I said, everything I've done on a computer up till now has been what applied to my job. So I said, I'm trainable. But I thought for sure that was going to kick me out of the group. So anyway, they called me a few days later and offered me the position. Very surprised. And it paid a lot less than what I was making at Macy's. And when you have an income, you're counting on that income. It's hard to make less. Always easier to make more. Hard to make less. And it was a considerable amount. So we prayed about it, and I decided to go ahead. They gave me 2 weeks to think about it, and really what I did was I chose being at church over that extra income, because I didn't want to be missing. And I think at the time I was teaching Sunday school, and sometimes I had to miss that. So I just decided, and I thank God when you do have a heart like that, and you're earnestly wanting to seek His will, I think He honors that. I didn't at the time, though, because my first week, I can remember I texted Tim and I said, you have got to pray for me. I'm in trouble. I said, I am way in over my head. I don't understand any of this stuff. I didn't know about cutting and pasting. Oh, everybody else does. I didn't know that. I didn't know drag and drop, all these shortcuts. I was amazed, but I felt the second day I went in, I said, my computer's not working. It wasn't on. Oh, that was really embarrassing. And I'm sure they all talked about that after that day. But anyway, I've been there 11 years, so I made it. I passed all the tests. But So I will tell you this, U of L was really good to work for, great benefits. And if you've got kids, they pay for your children's college and things like that, but they don't pay well and they don't give raises. And I didn't know that going into it. I thought, well, eventually I'll make my way up to what I was making at Macy's. No, I never did. In 9 years, I never got back up to what I was making at Macy's. And they kept they were trying to get me a raise. And because I wasn't technically a lead in our department, but I did the training for everybody in our department. So they were trying to get me a raise. And it went all the way through the Department of Pediatrics. The director of pediatrics said yes. And she had given me, my boss had given me an amount. And I was like, yes, that'll put me over what I was making at Macy's a little bit. So that would be awesome. And it got up to, I don't know, one of the bigwigs in U of L, and they said, no, pediatrics loses money. We can't give anybody a raise, regardless of the reason you want to give it. And I remember when my boss told me, she was crying because she was afraid I was going to leave. And you know, you start to think, well, I'm going to look for something else, but you don't really want to. And I can remember the director of the unit. She's a Christian woman, Dr. Sullivan. She sat down with me and she said, "Can you give us one more year? Give us one more year and see what happens." And gave it another year actually, and we merged with Norton. Everybody was afraid to merge with Norton. We didn't know what was going to happen to us. But as it turns out, they pay better. Their benefits are good. We don't get as much time off as we did at U of L, but they do pay better. And what my boss did for me was she and the director put together a position, because I don't have a degree at all. I have a certificate. I'm certified in regulatory. I had to test for that, but I don't have a degree. And any kind of leadership, supervisor, anything like that, you have to have a degree at Norton's. There's no using your experience to compensate for education. So they developed a position for me where I didn't have to have the degree. I had to have a certificate, which I had, and I didn't have to apply for it. They put me right into it. It was a lead position. And we all had to go to HR and sit down with them, and they told us what our new position was and what the pay would be. And he gave it to me hourly, and I knew it was good. And keep in mind, this was after Tim's company had sold, so this was going to be very beneficial to us. And I waited 9 years for it, but when he said it, and he said, "That's a considerable raise," and I was like, "Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that," and blah, blah, blah. And I got out of the elevator, and I got the calculator out of my phone, and I thought, that can't be right. That can't be right. So I did it again, and it was the same amount. And I called Tim, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I have never heard of a raise that good." Praise the Lord. I waited, stuck it out, but he provided for me. And you know, you're thinking at the time, this isn't fair, this isn't right, I do a really good job. But God knows the beginning from the end. And he knew when I was at Macy's that I was going to end up at U of L, end up working for Norton's. And I love my job. I still work with Missy. Missy works at home 100% of the time, so we don't get to see each other that much. But I'm very, very thankful for what the Lord did for us. And it was right on time. I really didn't need the extra money before. It would have been nice, but it came at the perfect time because of the situation with Tim. So I just want to say, wait, good things come to those who wait.
My grandma just gave me the look to get up. So, um, when it comes to my job, I just testimony kind of came to my mind. I won't go through the whole story, but whenever I graduated college, I was looking for a job, trying to find, I got that teaching degree that I'd always wanted, that I strove for, and just always had deeply desired. I went through college, and now I had to try to find a job. And so I always said I wanted to be careful when it came to where am I going to work? I want to be someplace that I can honor God. Your workplace and your environment. That's important. That's important. You're going in there 5 days a week, and so it's important to be in the right place. And so I was really praying about it, and I started applying for different jobs. And I'm a worrier. I get worried, and I get anxious, and I fret. It's all internal. I keep it all inside, and so I was just worrying and going through all these different possibilities when it came to, well, what if this happens, or what if this doesn't happen, or what if I do this and not that. I kept thinking of all these different scenarios in my mind, but there was one service when I felt very convicted, when Brother Robinson, he got up to talk, and he said, do you really trust God? Do you really trust Him with those big decisions you have to make in your life? Do you really trust Him with the big things? And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not trusting Him. I'm not turning it over to Him. And so God kept working. He was very merciful to me. He sent encouragement in so many ways when it came to just waiting for that interview, or waiting for to hear back, being rejected or accepted. But eventually that door, it did open up. And I'm so thankful that it did. I got a job at Christian Academy in Indiana, and it's been such a blessing to be there. Years ago, for years I said I want to do elementary school. I want to be an elementary school teacher. But there was one day, right before I started college, it was like something shifted in my mind. Just something, it was like I felt like the Lord was telling me, that's not what I want you to do. I don't want you to work with elementary. I want you to go into secondary. And every time I tell people, I'm like, I teach middle school and high school, they're like, whoa, really? That's scary. But I was like, you know what? I really feel like that's where I'm supposed to be. And when it came to the position at Christian Academy, in college, they often tell you it'll take you 4 years to get through. That's not always true. It took me 5. It took me 5 to get through. They made some changes when it came to the School of Education and all of that. So it took me an extra year to kind of get through. But if that extra year, if that hadn't happened, if I didn't have to attend college that extra year, I wouldn't have gotten the job at Christian Academy. The teacher who was leaving decided to stay on one more year, and then decided to step back. And that's when that door just opened wide open for me. And so I just have always taken that just as a lesson, just to, again, to trust God with those things, and to wait patiently, and to trust Him. Even when you can't see which way He's leading you. It taught me a great lesson, and I'm just thankful.
Tell Scott's testimony, although he probably should be the one to tell it. But we come to a time, Scott had a good job enough that I didn't have to work, and which I really appreciated that. I haven't worked in so many years. I don't know if I'd have any skills to do much of anything at this point, but he was working. He had a good job, and I didn't have to work, and Roman Haas sold out, and they were first before they sold to Dow, they started downsizing. They started cutting people out, and they were going down in the workforce from I don't know how many, 200 something, down to 51 people was all they were going to keep. And they were laying people off, and they were sending people home, and people were getting new jobs, and they were offering early retirement to people. Well, Scott wasn't old enough to retire at that point. He was, you were 45 maybe, but he was old enough that it was scary to be without a job. And so we were praying, Lord, what do we do? Do we just stand here and wait? And there was a song that keeps coming back in our lives. Says, stand still and watch God move. Sometimes we just have to stand still and see what happens. And we prayed, and he got offered some jobs. Some of the men that were getting jobs in other places, they would have spoke for him and got him on at a different factory. It wouldn't have been any better job. It would have been maybe a sidestep or maybe worse, I don't know. But we didn't know what to do. And he was number 168, I believe it was, on the seniority scale, which means 168 means more than 100 people had to go elsewhere before he was ever going to get to keep his job. And we waited, and people kept retiring. They kept offering different retirement packages to the older men. And there were people that kept getting other jobs, and there were people they were letting go of. And by the time that we got all the way to the end of it, he was number 51. And I thought, well, isn't that amazing? And it wasn't that long until he was the senior man in the company, in the whole company. But that was after that several had retired, and the Lord just opened that up. And all we had to do was sit and wait. But Lord, that's hard to do. Oh, Lord, how do you sit and wait when you know something and you're wanting to do something about it? You want to figure it out. I've got to do something. We've got to see what we can do. And the Lord keeps saying, wait. That's a hard situation when you have to wait. When you can't do any, when you can't do anything about it's one thing. It's when there is something you could do, that's even harder. It's if there's something you can't control, you have no choice but to sit and wait. But when it's something that you could possibly be doing, and God says, wait, then that's when your faith is really tried. Lord, are you sure this is what you want us to do? But I appreciate that the Lord has taken care of us so many times, and then turned around, and because he stayed at that job, he has a retirement. He has he had a 401k, and he had a retirement, a pension. And when it come time, he retired young. He retired at 55, and I was so glad he could. But that was right in the middle of COVID, and it's right after the stock market went that way. It was how many years has this been? 4 years? And it was 4 years ago, and it's when his 401k took a dip like you wouldn't believe. And we looked at it and we thought, are we sure? He hadn't got his paperwork through yet. We thought, are we sure we're supposed to do this? But we kept, and the financial advisor we went to, she said, you may have never heard this song before, but my father-in-law gave it to me, stand still and let God move. And we sat there and looked at each other like, what else are we supposed, what other thing do we need? Because the Lord was telling us it was time just to go ahead. So we went ahead with it. And do you know, before his paperwork actually went through, the stock market did the dip thing that it did. Of course, now it's still not stable. I know that, but we're not in the stock market anymore. We've moved out of that, and praise God that we did, because there's nothing stable about it. But I appreciate how the Lord has. Now, it's not easy right now. We're living on our savings, and that's not an easy place to be living, because he's not old enough for Social Security yet. I am, and my Social Security is about that much. Not enough to make a car payment even, it's very small. But yet, the Lord has provided for us. It's like we've never went without anything. We've never had to worry about if our bills were going to be paid, because they always have been. And I want to thank the Lord that maybe it's not easy to stand still, but it's always right. And the song I had this morning was he may not come in a hurry. And sometimes we wonder why. And not in the way expected, but he always comes on time. We've always had the Lord come on time. He's come on time for us every time. He's an on-time God, on time every time.
This is sparked. Hello. This has all sparked some memories and everything, just everything that everybody's been talking about. And yesterday, it seems like my kids are like continuously going through growth spurts. Like I cannot buy enough clothing because they just keep on growing out of stuff. And everyone who knows me knows that I am one of the thriftiest people out there. Like, I don't like to call myself cheap, but I am very thrifty. So, and I like to tell my kids these stories because I tell them, like we have to thank the Lord for the small things, because if we don't thank him for the small things, then why would he want to do anything big for us? So, just a side note. So yesterday I had to buy Asa some new dress shoes. We were at the campground last week and his shoes were just completely destroyed from the gravel and they were just getting too small for him anyway. So I said, okay, we got to get you some new dress shoes. But I mean, for a kid's dress shoes, they're like $25 and I'm too cheap for that. So I said, Lord, okay, so I went to this consignment shop right by my house, the Mustard Seed. And so I said, Lord, I got to find him some shoes. I got to find him some dress shoes. So I walk in there and I found him the exact same pair of shoes that I had him before. They were brand new for $3.47. And I took him up there to pay for them. And the lady said, I just put those out there. And I was like, of course you did. So I just, I told my kids, like this is, we should be thankful for these things. And all the time, I mean, I'm always finding good deals on stuff. And so I'm just thankful to the Lord for that. But it also brought back memories of back, whenever we first got married and, I had graduated college and I thought I was going to go get me a career and all this different stuff. So I moved to Evansville and didn't really find a career, but a job per se. And so I worked and then it was time to have children. And so we were getting ready to have Aubrey. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to keep on working because I just want to work. That's what I want to do. We need to save. And we had tried to be thoughtful with our money. We took a Dave Ramsey class, so we were, trying to live debt-free and everything. So, but it's a lot different when you go from 2 incomes to 1 income. So, but we had tried to set ourselves up to live on 1 income. So, when we had Aubrey, we just finally made the decision that I was just going to quit. So I quit my job, and I was a little concerned, because again, going from 2 to 1 income. But, after he changed all his exemptions and everything on his taxes, we made almost as much money from his check that we did with me working. So I was thankful to the Lord for that. And so it allowed me to stay home and raise her. And then when the other 2 came and everything, and then it was time to decide for school and everything like that, I never thought I would homeschool my kids. But it's something Brennan wanted us to do, and I just kind of got on board, and I can't imagine it any other way now because I've made just such amazing friendships with homeschool moms. And I mean, Brennan jokes because everywhere we go, he's like, you know everybody, every place we go in Indiana. Because I'm just, I'm like, we should be friends, like you homeschool, I homeschool. And so I've gotten involved in so many different things that it's actually a little too much. So anytime somebody says that your homeschool kids are not social, I'm like, you haven't seen my kids, because they could talk to anybody. So, but I'm thankful that the Lord allowed me to be able to homeschool, thankful that he allowed us to live on 1 income. Things were
tight last year. Like, I mean, I think for everybody thinks we're getting tight and everything, but I'm thankful that the Lord allowed Brandon to get a raise so that it's not as tight. It's still tight, but it's better than it was. But I just try to tell my kids, you know, I try to talk to them about all the little things that the Lord has done so that we can, you know, be appreciative to that and that they recognize those things, you know, in their life too. So I just wanted to say that.
How the Lord lead me and guide me in my job. And I had worked at Tyson for 24 years, and I was thinking about quitting. And I prayed about it and put up fleece before the Lord. I talked to Jesse about it. We were praying, and we were having a union strike. And I put up a fleece that for our new contract, if they were going to take things away from me, that would be a sign that it was okay for me to go ahead and quit Tyson. And I was worried about quitting and losing overtime and then ended up having to go back. And I didn't want to start all over again. And so I talked to Jesse about it, and he told me about Gideon putting a fleece before the Lord and put another one before the Lord. And so he told me about that, and I read about that. And so I put up another fleece before the Lord. And I asked the Lord, I said, no, Lord, I said, you know, I want your will in this, and if it's your will, I'd like to go on and quit. And so my mom and dad had a red car, and my neighbor had the same car as my mom and dad. And so one day I was home. I was home from work. I had a day off from work, and I was home from work. And I was at home, and you know, and I was still worried about it. I was just really worried about it. You know, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And so I was looking out the window, and I put up another fleece before the Lord, just right then. I was looking out that window, and I said, Lord, I said, if you want me to go ahead and quit, I said, you let that car pull into my driveway. And that car pulled into my driveway. It was my mom, and they had the same car as my neighbor. And Mom knocked at the door. I said, Mom, I said, how'd you know I was home from work? She said, I didn't, Judy. She said, Desiree left a book at my house, and I thought she might need it for school. So I went up here to the store, and so I thought I would drop it off, and I'd lay it on the bench out there. So I went ahead, and I quit. Well, I went back to school, and so I started praying about getting another job, and I didn't want to work no weekends. I wanted to be able to go to church and stuff. And so my friend called me, and she had worked at Tyson with me, and she was working out here at Parker. And she said, Judy, I haven't seen you for a while. I said, let's have lunch or something. And I said, okay. So I met her, and we went and had lunch. And she said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I went back and got my GED. And I said, I'm looking for a job. And I said, but I definitely won't work Sundays. I really don't want to work weekends, but I definitely won't work Sundays. And I said, I want to try to be home when Desiree gets home. And I said, I'm just looking for a part-time job. And she says, well, I think you can get on at Parker. I said, Sami, her name was Sami. I said, I don't think they'll harm me like that. I said, for the hours that I need. And she says, Judy, she says, let me get you an application. And she said, let me take it into work for you. I said, okay, and I prayed about it. Well, when I went for my interview and stuff and everything, and I prayed about it, and they were going to let me work 9 to 1. I could be home when Desiree got off the bus. My neighbors was keep her and let her ride the bus with her children. And so, I mean, all worked out. And another thing was a blessing is that when Desiree went to Bible school, I used to take her to Missy's, and she would ride with Shelby and Missy to Bible school, and then we'd have to try to make arrangements to pick her up. Well, I got to take Desiree, drop her off here for Bible school, got to pick her up from Bible school, and of course, you know, my dad married Mary, so I was able to go out there and help them after I got off work. Even when Dad was on his deathbed, I was able to go out there and see him in the morning before I went to work and see him. I got to take care of him. See, God knows. If you ask God's will, and I asked God's will, and I said, lead me and guide me, and I told my friend, I said, well, I don't know about driving that way, all that way over here and that, but, you know, I left it up to God, and God He just laid the track all the way. I mean, I could see God's working all the way through with everything, with Desiree going to Bible school and Dad marrying Mary, and they needed help, and I mean, it was just, and I didn't have to work weekends. I got paid vacations. I got paid holidays. I mean, and I loved my job. I mean, they gave me jobs. I mean, nobody else didn't want them, but at the time I didn't think I wanted them either. But I always when they gave me a job, I always prayed and asked God. I said, Lord, I don't know about this job. Nobody else don't want it, but they want to stick it to me. But I'd always end up loving them. I mean, I always asked God to help me with them, and He always did. And everybody told me when I retired out there, they said, you're going to miss the people, but you won't miss the job. I miss the job. I miss the people. I love my job. I mean, God had truly blessed me and blessed me and blessed me in that job. I mean, He really did, and I really appreciate it.
God supplying your job. And I have been praying for 2 weeks for my new son up here that God will show him what job. And everybody's been testifying about God showing you. Now, God can put you where you need to be. It's when Sharon Ann she had graduated from her nursing and or LPN, and she wanted a job. And she said, I don't know what to do, where to apply. I said, open the phone book and tell me where you want to work. And she said, well, I think I'd like to work at Letterman's Spine Clinic, and she was somewhat laughing. I said, all right, send your resume. And she did, and I kept praying, and she got the job. They said, how did you know there was a job opening? And she said, my mother felt like there was. But it works that way. And prayer does make a difference. And Brother Tim, your company may have gone under, but we found you another job. You're most welcome. But God does supply our needs. Not always our wants and not always the most beautiful jobs, but he does supply our needs. She was singing, The Lord Will Provide. I could remember I was only about 7, and my father had malaria because he had been in the Pacific in World War II, and he was in bed, and my mother, well, you didn't work outside the home at that time, so things were pretty close. We had peanut butter sandwiches for breakfast and dinner. But Mom made sure we had green beans or something for the big meal. But things were bad. Mom was worrying. And I can always remember her walking out, and on the front porch were 2 bags full of groceries. I'm sure they came from some of the church people, but they supplied our needs. But God put it on their hearts because I don't think everybody knew what the problem was. So we had that when I was younger. Then when Jesse worked at Philip Morris and the electricians went on strike and his union was going to honor the strike, which meant we got nothing. They were honoring the strike. The strikers got money from picketing or standing out there, but we got nothing. And we'd gone to church, and this brother shakes hands with Jesse and gives him a $50 bill in the handshake. But I can remember things that helped. And Jessica, I can remember praying before we went to Goodwill that I could find what the kids needed each time. But these are stories about the Lord providing. He has provided, but he's never comes early. I always like getting my Christmas gifts early, but that doesn't, not everybody agrees. They hold them until I'm the last one because I'm so adamant that I want to open the package right away. But anyway, God doesn't always send us right away, but he sends it when the time is right. He's always on time. And in time, on time, there's a whole every time. But God has supplied, and I've just got to be thankful. And one more thing, Sunday, I got to feeling so bad, and I was really hurting. And I said, Lord, I thought I'd go home and go to bed, and I said, no, here I am. The Spirit of the Lord is here. And so I had everyone pray for me. And do you know, I sat back there the rest of the service. God came. Now, that's one time he came right then, right quick. But I have learned over the years not to expect it quick. But he does come in time and on time. And I'm just thankful, and I'm thankful for all those that have testified tonight. I'm not going to teach school, I'm sorry, but it seems like we're getting good jobs teaching or doing the computer. She's teaching, they're teaching, and we'll all, but I'd like to teach everyone that you can trust the Lord. Trust the Lord, and he does supply, and I'm thankful for that.
I've been blessed to be retired, but I was in 2001. Everybody remembers what happened on 9/11. Days before that, my husband had lost a very good job. And at that time, I was working as a freelance writer. So being a freelance writer means you get paid by the article and you don't get a regular salary, every week or, by the hour or something. So I was making enough money to say that I'm making some money, but not enough to live on. So I waited a while, and it came time that I realized I was going to have to get a real job. So I applied for some jobs, and I didn't get anything, and I thought, well, retail is always hiring, so I looked online and found that Dillard's looked like they had some openings, so I went to Dillard's and I started working there. And I worked at the Bashford Manor store, and 5 months later it closed, but I was able to transfer over to Mall St. Matthews. So I worked at Dillard's for a little over 2.5 years, and it came to the point that I thought I have to do something else. So I got a different job that didn't work out. It turned out it was with a private, like a trade school, and so the government actually closed them down. So I thought, well, I have to do something. I can't just sit around. And so I had been to an eye doctor at the Eye Care Institute. And so I thought, and hadn't thought any more about that practice until I started needing a job. And so I thought, well, I have a bachelor's degree in communication. What do you do with a bachelor's degree in communication? You work in advertising, public relations, or in the media. So I thought, well, there is not going to be any decrease in the demand for medical care in my lifetime. But I don't have the luxury of going back to school and like being a nurse or x-ray technician or something like that. So, but then I found out that I got, it was like a grant scholarship or something like that, that I could learn medical billing and coding. So I started that, and then I looked on the website of the Eye Care Institute, and they said they were always taking applications. So I sent in my resume, and I got a call just within a day or two. I went for an interview, and I got called later that day, and they offered me the job. And I worked there until I retired. I didn't make big money. I didn't become a millionaire, but I always had a job. And the boss, the manager of my department, just a few weeks after I started working there, maybe a month, got transferred to a different job, and they gave the job to a young woman in my department who really knew what she was doing, but she didn't get along with all the employees, and so we had a constant turnover in that department. But I stayed, and she took a liking to me and trained me. I had never worked in a medical office before, so that worked out for me, and I stayed there until I retired. And I was not one to take a lot of time off, call in if I got a cough or something, or just because I didn't feel like going to work. And so I had accumulated a lot of paid time off. And when I retired not only with, a good reputation in the practice, but I got all this extra money. I think my last check was something like $2,500. And so that was nice. And so I really appreciated that. And then about 6 months after I had retired, I got a call from the manager of the department. And I thought, well, that's nice that she's called to say hello. And she said, well, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I've written this novel about the Exodus. She said, well, speaking of the Exodus, she said, we've had people leave, and we wanted to know if you would come back and work for a while. And I said, well, I would work for a while, but I don't want to do it for a year. So I went back and worked for about 6 weeks. 1 or 2 weeks I worked, for 40 hours, and then I worked just half a day or something. But that was such a blessing. And something that happened during the time that I worked there, they told me how much I'd be making when I was hired, and so I said, that's acceptable. So, and then after a year, I had a review, and so they told me what they offered me, and so I said I'd hoped for more than that. So the administrator said, well, he'd split it with me, so I got, a little bit of a raise. And then they didn't give me a raise every year, but, I did get paid. And so one day, they had hired a young man to answer the phone. And so one day, I heard him discussing with another employee how much he was making. And I thought, he's making more than I'm making. And so I didn't say anything to anybody because, like in most jobs, employers say don't discuss your salary with your coworkers. So I didn't say anything. Well, sometime later than that, it was at least 6 months, it might have been a year after that, one of the ophthalmology technicians started discussing her salary with her coworkers. And so everybody got an email, don't do that. If you are concerned about your salary, discuss it with your immediate supervisor. So as soon as I read that email, I walked up to my supervisor and I said, I overheard him say that, and he was making more than I was making. And I said, if it's because he has a college degree, I have a college degree as well. Well, she walked into the administrator's office. It wasn't 5 minutes before she walked out, and I had a nice raise. So I got a raise because of what somebody else had done, but I was thankful that she did that because that was nice to have that raise. And I didn't have health insurance when I started there, and so I lived in fear because you never know. Somebody told me one time, you never know when you're going to get run over by a truck. So I didn't have any health insurance. And so, but I lived through that. But before I retired, I did have health insurance. And so now I'm retired and I'm thankful for Medicare. And I'm thankful that I was able to retire because at one time I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to retire. I said, I had told somebody I'll never be able to retire until a doctor says this woman's dead. But I'm thankful that I was able to retire when I still have enough health to do things that I want to do. I can still walk and talk and drive. And I was able to work at the campground for work week and plan to work at the campground for camp meeting. And I just feel blessed, and I thank the Lord.
He's an on-time God. Yes, he is. Oh.
Yes, He is. Oh, 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 on time God. Yes, He is. Job said He may not come when you want Him, but He'll be there right on time. I tell you, He's an on-time God. Yes, He is. Well, He's an on-time God. Yes, He